this pasture was overgrown. We put the horses in here, and the horses are the greatest riding lawnmowers known to man, but they tend to do it unevenly. And then we pulled the horses out. It still was kind of high, so we bush hogged it. It was bush hogged, I feel like, a little bit short and maybe not as carefully as sometimes. We have a variety of forages that we've put out here. You can see the clover and the different grasses. There's some plantain, some chicory, a variety, because I wanted my dairy sheep to have, why go to a salad bar and just get iceberg lettuce, right? So I wanted them to have, they have small rumens compared to cows, so I wanted every mouthful they had to just be lots of nutrition. So now I feel like this pasture is having a hard time coming back, and it's about 5 acres, and I felt like, because it was so big and I had maybe 20 lambs out here, it was easy for them to let it regenerate, because we haven't cross-fenced it, and we'd like to. We're setting up water lines and fences, but at this point, what are your thoughts on if they're eating in the same places, because they won't go where I want them to. Sheep are directionally impaired, and so they won't go where I want them to unless I stand out here and walk with them. I'm not going to do that. So what do you think about getting this to regenerate? What are some ways we can do it?
Well, you said the sheep are directionally impaired. They're probably going back to what was very tender. So at one point, when this was real tender and they took a bite out of it, they said that's pretty good. Then they're going to go back, because the plants are more tender the closer they are to the ground, so they're going to go back here, and then they might even go back again. Well, what about over there? Well, this is actually more tender right now, so what they may end up doing is they may end up taking it down to like what you see here, which that's pretty short. Over here is pretty short. For over here, it's pretty short. And what we talked about a little earlier was we talked about solar panels and the ability for grass to recover. So this here has limited, I mean, you look at, so some of the material, that's already dead material. So there's let's see, okay, here we go. This is all it has in order to recover and regenerate. And you can see this, I mean, there's leaves are starting there and whatever, however got mowed or grazed before from the horses. But that's a lot more work that's going to happen for that plant to take care of its roots than one that's, you know, than it's taller, right? So there's just less energy this can draw from the sun to take it down to the roots. So like you said, you've got about 5 acres here, and all these guys are going to graze wherever you want. So you've got some that are grazing here, some that are grazing here. They're calling the shots. Thank you.
Exclamation
yeah,
mark.
exclamation mark. And so they're going to say, I'm going to eat wherever I want. And you got really nice forage here. It's the last week of May starting, and it's going to be highs in the 90s, and it's dry.
Yes.
So who's calling the shots on that? They're not calling the shots on that.
Right.
God's calling the shots on that one. So he's saying we're going to be hot, we're going to be dry, and there's not going to be a lot of extra benefit for these from moisture, but it's going to be hot. So they can grow if there's some moisture in here, but we need these guys to not be the boss. So under an ideal situation, we'll just talk about ideal situations because I know that you have a lot of young farmers that are starting out and they just may have 5 acres. And they get
Maybe
their 5 acres.
they did a perimeter fence, and they figured, I got a perimeter fence, I got a fence up, I can put animals out there.
And what else would they have had to do?
They have to get water to them.
All right,
you know,
so
they're
you've got
not
some
going to
water
survive
there.
without water. So we have water trough there.
Yep. Okay, so they got water, they got trough. Okay, great. So they spend the money for that. Now, I'm going to say something that they're probably going to go, oh no, but we can't do that. Because I'm going to say that ideally you want to tell these sheep where to go in this. And you want to tell them to go there for a certain amount of days. And the way that you tell them is through
rotational grazing.
Through a fence.
Through a fence.
Through a fence. You
Yes.
tell them where they can
Yes.
go, where they
Yes.
can't go.
Yes.
So if you were able to cross fence this, if you had, I see you have some hot wire here. If you were able to cross fence this, then what you could do is you could leave the sheep on one part and let the rest have a chance to grow up. But you're going to need a couple things for that. And one of them is sitting right over there, that water,
Yeah.
right? So that water tank's got to be over there. How's that going to happen?
Gotta get a water line.
Got to get a water line. So I would encourage your young farmers, especially when they're looking at cost of, okay, I'm going to put up a perimeter fence, I'm going to do hot wire. Well, make sure, if you can, try to get that water line, try to find the money to spend that, take that water line all the way down to the end and get it set up so that you can splice into it wherever you want, spend the extra money for the tees that you need at a certain time, and then you can move that water down there to each section. If you're milking, if they need a lane, you do that first, because otherwise what you're going to do is you're going to say, well, I can't move them because my water is over there. And so this entire investment, and I'm in the seed business, so all whatever you might buy for seed, this entire investment is subject to that water.
Right.
It's not the right balance. And that balance is it's gonna bite you, because all these plants, you know, they're gonna suffer if they can't get regenerated. In that case, then what you do is you get in a cycle. Kind of the easy cycle to remember is about once a month for cool season grasses. Depending, if you get good moisture, you might be able to cycle through every 3 weeks. If it's a little dry, a little stressful, whatnot, you might you need 5 weeks. But that gives that chance to grow up again, and then they come in here, they grazed, and then they move on.
Well, let's say we took this pasture and divided it into 4 or 5 parts. You know, let's say it's a 4-acre pasture and you put it in 4 sections. So you would have a higher stocking rate, more sheep, goats, whatever, in smaller paddocks. And then your idea is to rotate them around.
Yep.
So we were talking about this a little bit before. You have so many inches. How can you measure or know if you don't have special equipment? And you know, maybe you can eye it up, maybe you can't, or maybe they're not doing it equally. So how would you know? Because you're saying so many days. Well, let's say people aren't that good at figuring that out. You know, like, well, or you know, can I put it on my calendar? But it's weather related, it's rain related, it's everything related. So
there's some really neat tools out there, and there's some fantastic ways that people can learn how to do it. There's things like rising plate meters, which you as a regime, you go around and you measure how much forage is there, and it helps you calculate it, and you calculate your stock and your stocking rate, and you can learn to estimate how many days of forage that I might have. Those work when people use them on a regular basis. And if you go out and work something on a regular basis, you will learn, and there's multiple ways to learn. So even if you don't have some of those things, if you walked your field, like if we walked this field today, and then in 5 days we walked it again, and we were just kind of looking at like where the grass touches. You know, did the grass come far here? How about over here? Was it here? It looked like everything maybe it was only about this big. And you kept your stocking rate the same, and 2 days later it was down half that. You should be able to make the conclusion that, you know, in 2 more days I'm not going to have anything.
Yeah.
But in the same thing, if you felt like it was maintaining that, then you say, yeah, looks like my stocking rate's doing all right here. Maybe I don't need to move these guys out.
We have our dairy sheep, and of course we're going to have the babies, the lambs. You can't have milk without breeding them, and then you're going to have babies. And so when we figure out on stocking rate or feed, you know, like a lot of people know that with most grains, it's 1 pound of feed per 100 pounds for the animal. So with grass, it's a little different from that, but they're still doing some tonnage, pounds, and all that, but you just may not know it. But so what you're talking about with your height of your grass, that's what you're trying to see. And we know that lambs grow at a pretty rapid rate. So the stocking rate can change as the animals get bigger, because if it was a pound, 1 pound per 100, and they were 50 pounds, and then in 30 days they're 75 pounds or whatever, it's going to change. So it's not like it's a constant if you have young animals. And young animals are obnoxious like this, so they make a great video.
Well, and your forage changes. Your forage is going to change. I mean, if you get good moisture in the next 2 weeks, it's going to be very different than if you don't get any moisture in the next 2 weeks. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
2 weeks ago it was different than it's going to be 2 weeks from now.
Yes.
And I think they're hungry because they took it out.
Well, they just want, they like companionship at dinner time. You know, it's like,
see.
you know, they want to go out to eat with us. So they're inviting us into the kitchen here.
Well, thank you.